so we don't lose it. All right. So I'm just going to wait one more minute for people to get in. And then, oh, let me mute everybody that comes in. Yes. All right. All right. So what I'm going to do with this is not so much teach you the physiology behind it, because we'll do that in lecture, but I do want to teach you how to actually work an ABG problem. Okay, so I'm just going to go down through the packet, and then we're going to get into all of this other stuff and everything, and hopefully help you understand a little bit about how to do an ABG. Okay, so let's just go ahead, and people can pop in whenever they pop in. All right, so so what we're looking at is acid-base balance or homeostasis, and how do we keep it from going out of homeostasis. So the first thing that we need to look at, though, and I'll put that over here, is what are our normal ranges, our homeostatic ranges. So the first thing that we need to know is pH. We're going to be doing a lot of things: anaerobic respiration, digestion of proteins, different kinds of things that are going to change or affect the pH of our bodies, of our plasma, really, because we're taking a look at what's the plasma pH, and then we're going to adjust from there. So first of all, what should it be? Well, it should be between 7.35 and 7.45. And remember that we're trying to get to 7.4. So or trying to stay at 7.4. So you can see that we're not going to allow much of a change. 7.35 is not much, 7.45 is not much. So we have to stay within a really narrow range. And there's going to be two other things that are going to affect what my pH is. Let's go back to our equation that this is going to be based on, or that this is based on. So I'm just going to write it up here at the top. So make sure, yeah, you can see. Okay, so CO2 plus H2O in our reversible reaction and catalyzed right here by carbonic anhydrase is then going to be carbonic acid, and then we're going to go to hydrogen ions plus bicarbonate ions. Okay, so this is the basis of everything that we're going to do, is this reaction right here. And so there are some other values that we need to keep within homeostatic range besides pH, because they're going to affect pH. So those are these two things right here. So CO2 levels and bicarbonate levels. So here is the next value that you need to know as far as homeostasis is concerned. So PCO2 of our arterial blood. And so we're looking at arterial blood. And I'll explain why in just a sec. Okay, so arterial blood, our PCO2 should be between 35 and 45 millimeters of mercury. Okay, if you remember what is pulmonary venous blood as it's leaving the capillary bed in the pulmonary veins and going back to the left side of the heart, is going to be 40. So that's perfect, but we're okay if we go on, if we go on either side of that. Okay, so PCO2 should be between 35 and 45, and that's our optimum, is 40. Okay, and so then our bicarbonate levels are also going to affect what the pH is going to be of the plasma. And so our bicarbonate levels should be between, 22 to 26, and here's a unit you've probably never seen before, milliequivalents per liter. Now, you can go online and you can find, if you Google ABG tutorials, you'll find 1,000 ABG tutorials easily. And some of those tutorials may tell you 28 right here, but we're going with 26 because that's what we use in the nursing program too. And all of the stuff that I have is all 26. So there it is. If you see 28, I guess just ignore it. if you happen to do an online tutorial other than what I'm giving you right now. Milliequivalents per liter. So I'm going to write it over here. So it's MEQ, little tail, per liter. Okay, is that good, Ethan? Because I know it's kind of messy as my handwriting gets worse. Okay, great. All right. Okay, so now here's the deal. As we go through our day and we're digesting proteins and we're doing things anaerobically and whatever, our pH is going to change. And so we need to be able to mediate that change or ameliorate it, I guess, make it so that it's not so bad. Okay, so those of you who have been in chemistry or who are in chemistry will know that if we want to decrease the change or decrease the effect of an acid or base in a solution, we can add a buffer to that. And so we do have buffers in our body. One is actually just chemical buffers, and then two are actual processes or systems of the body that will take care of the system, not just chemically, but physiologically. There'll be stuff that the body's going to do to counteract that. So I'm going to list them, and then I'm going to go to a different sheet of paper and elaborate just a little bit more on that. But like I said, I'm not going to give you a lot of physiology today. I just want to teach you how to do an ABG. All right, so the first important buffer system in the body are chemical buffers. So we'll do the chemical buffers here in just a second. And then, hang on. I don't need you anymore. Period, at least today. Exclamation point. Sorry, I had to text Mr. Burke. All right, so chemical buffers, and then we have a respiratory system is going to affect the pH of our blood and our renal system. So urinary, kidneys. All right, so those are the three important chemical buffers that we have within the body. But let's just really quickly look at some special things about those. So the first thing is chemical buffers. There are three chemical buffers. Okay, the first one is bicarbonate ion / carbonic acid. All right, so the bicarbonate ion carbonic acid is going to be our extracellular fluid buffer. Okay, so whether you're in the plasma or in the interstitial fluid, this will be the buffer because it's not going to be out, it's not going to be in the cells. And remember, we have a lot of bicarbonate in our plasma because when we breathe, when we produce CO2, remember 70% of our CO2 is converted to bicarbonate ions so that we can transport it in the plasma. And that's why we transport it in, or why we convert it to bicarbonate, is because we want it to act as a buffer. Okay, so if we look at, so bicarbonate's going to be a base, because a base is a hydrogen acceptor, right? Proton acceptor. So we can combine, so that can bind to that. Or if something is too basic, then we can take carbonic acid. Oops, I'm off the screen. We can take carbonic acid and convert it back to bicarbonate, and then we donated a hydrogen ion. Okay, so this is a hydrogen ion donator, this is a hydrogen ion acceptor, and so through that means we'll be able to buffer the extracellular fluid. Okay, so it's not just out in our cell, I mean out in our extracellular fluid where we're going to have pH changes. We're going to have pH changes within the cell. So then we have phosphates. So, and HPO4 minus 2, those are going to act as buffers for our intracellular fluid. Okay, so inside of the cell, they will act as the buffers. And then because we have things in the plasma and these things within the cell that they can be both, and those are proteins. Okay, so proteins are going to be both plasma and ICF, but not interstitial fluid, because we don't have proteins in our interstitial fluid. And if you think about, well, why don't we have proteins in our interstitial fluid? It's because that would screw up our colloid osmotic pressure of the capillaries. So we can't ever have protein in the interstitial fluid. That will lead to edema, super bad edema, if we had protein in their interstitial fluid. Okay, so, all right. So let's see, I'm just trying to decide where, okay, let's, okay, that's far enough for that, because we need to know these things shortly. We're gonna come back to this. So we're just gonna do the chemical buffers right now. Okay, because we'll probably do respiratory right after this. All right, so now in 2, we can take this equation, put it back down here. So CO2 and water is gonna give us carbonic acid, which will result in hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions. Okay, well, now I need to go to the next thing. So we're going to talk about respiration, and we're going to talk about renal mechanisms, and then we'll go into ABGs, because we're only going to go to right here today. I don't know, we'll see. Okay. So the next thing we want to look at is our respiratory system. How can our respiratory system act as a buffer? Well, it's all because of that lovely equation again that I'm going to write right now, because I'm going to add some things to it. Stuff that we've already done, so this won't be new to you. All right, so remember back when we were talking about gas transport, and we said, hey, this is a reversible reaction. Which way is this going to go in when we're loading CO2? Okay, so when we're, oops, without falling off my chair. When we're loading CO2, remember that the equation proceeds to the right. So this is going to be in our tissues. Okay. So, in our tissues, notice that things become more acidic. Okay, so our pH will drop. Just put a little note right there. pH drops in tissues. Oops. Okay, and so now let's think about, well, when would I have a time that I would need more hydrogen ions? Okay, when I would need a drop in pH. Well, I need it when I'm in a situation, something bad's going on, and I have a situation where my pH is too high. Okay, so I'm going to put over here, if pH is too high, or we say alkaline, how can we correct that alkalinity there? Okay, how can we do that really easily? Well, obviously up here I can have my carbonic acid go back here. So I can have my carbonic acid donate hydrogen ions to lower my pH if I were in, backwards, if I'm in an alkaline situation. But you know what? I have a limited number of chemical buffers. I can use them up really rapidly if I'm in an acid-base imbalance. And so is there something else that I can do maybe to fix it, fix my body from being too alkaline? Well, guess what? If this CO2, if we drive it to the right here in our tissues, it's giving off hydrogen ions too to lower our pH. And so what kind of breathing would cause the reaction to be shifted to the right? Well, that kind of breathing, oops, is called hypoventilation. Okay, so if my tissues, and we'll talk about how do you get into an alkaline situation here in just a minute. If I am too alkaline, if my pH is too alkaline and I've used up all my carbonic acid, guess what? I'm going to decrease my rate and depth of breathing. Okay, so hypoventilation is going to correct for an alkaline situation, okay, because I'm going to increase the number of hydrogen ions that I have right here. Conversely, if we go over here, we know that the reaction works to the left in the lungs, because we already learned that, left in the lungs. So this would make my, we'll put over here. So the result is pH is high in the lungs. So when would I want to do this? How could my lungs be fixing this? Well, it's if my pH, is too low to begin with. How can I change my breathing that would raise my pH? Well, guess what? Make the reaction go to the left. And how do we make the reaction go to the left? Hyperventilation. So think about, you guys, you just did a sprint. Okay, you just busted out a 200 meter. Let's do a serious sprint. Okay, I just ran a 200 meter race. Okay, and so I did anaerobic respiration, right? 200 meter race. So what did I do? Lactic acid, right? I made lactic acid. So now the pH of my tissues is low, right? How are you breathing at the end of a 200 meter race? You're hyperventilating, right? So you're hyperventilating not because you need oxygen, because you know what, guys, you didn't use any oxygen. Well, you used some, but the majority of the respiration you were doing was anaerobic respiration, was lactic acid fermentation. So what are you doing? You're not putting back the O2. You're eliminating the CO2, and in eliminating the CO2, driving the reaction to the left this way, look at what you're doing. You're taking away these hydrogen ions, and you're getting rid of them, and so your pH is going to rise. Isn't that beautiful? And you thought you breathed heavy after a race because you didn't have any oxygen. Nope, doesn't have anything to do with that, because your arterial blood is not below 60 millimeters of mercury. So never, if you're just running a 200 meter race, maybe if you're running a 200 meter race on the top of Mount Everest, then maybe you would be at, arterial blood lower than 60 millimeters of mercury, but O2, but no. So that has absolutely nothing to do with it. You are hyperventilating because your pH is too low. You have too many CO2s, too much of this stuff, and you're trying to drive the reaction to the left and get rid of them. Isn't that a beautiful thing? I love it. Okay, let's go ahead and do renal mechanisms for pH balance, and then we'll just go into ABGs. Okay, so what can your kidneys then do? Let me do another paper. So there's that if you still want it. Of course, I can't see it. All right. So how can your kidneys do acid base. Hello, Mr. Burke. You want to come say hi in my class? Okay, so what are our renal mechanisms? You have to look like up underneath there or something. Wave at them or something. Oh, that's creepy.
Wait, did my face get in there?
Yeah, your nose and your eyes. Can I, because I'm using the camera, can I make that not be backwards? But I don't think so, because it's
Hi,
like,
Mr. Burke's nose.
Hey, hey, is this backwards to you guys,
No,
or is this forwards
right.
to you guys?
forwards. Because I already asked.
So you can tell it in the app. Do you have the app on this one?
Don't screw with it, because I don't even know.
Oh, well, it's not too crazy. But when I go video settings, you can choose right here.
Mirror my video. Don't mirror my video. Okay.
Okay.
Sweet.
And it's still forwards to you guys, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank
Love you,
you.
bye.
I knew there was something, but.
Yeah.
Okay, so I do need you today. Okay, all right, love you, bye.
Love you, bye.
All right, so renal system then, here's your two things. So let's look at pH too low. So don't do that. Is Josh here? Do you know Josh Dixon? Did he make it today? I guess not. Okay. Anybody else? No. If our pH is too low, what condition are we in?
Acidosis.
Yay! Perfect. All right. Okay. So we're either going to be in acidosis or we're going to be in what? What's the other thing? What's the opposite of acidosis?
Alkaline or something.
Yeah, alkaline or something, alkalosis. Yep, perfect. Oh, you guys. You know what? I just love teaching you guys. You're so awesome. I think no, really, not think. I know you guys are my best class ever, because look at how incredible, amazing you are under all of these stupid circumstances. I'm just so proud of you. So I will remember you guys for absolutely forever. Till I get dementia or something. Okay, so acidosis, alkalosis. So we know with acidosis our pH is too low. So really, what do you want to do? What would be the best thing to correct for acidosis?
Elimination.
Of?
Hydrogen.
Yay, yep. So how are we going to eliminate it? We are going to secrete hydrogen ions. Hey, how do we do that? Remember, what did we see today? A sodium hydrogen antiport in the proximal convoluted tubule. Oops. Okay, isn't that beautiful? Look at that. We're secreting hydrogen ions. So that's one thing. Second thing, if I can't get rid, if I can't fix my pH to the point where I need it to be by secreting hydrogen ions back into the tubule, then my next best thing is to, and I won't make you figure that out, is reabsorb bicarbonate. So I can bring that back. I can make sure that I reabsorb all of my bicarbonate that I have, or because the cells in the proximal convoluted tubule have carbonic anhydrase, oh, what do you know? We can make new bicarbonate. So I'm going to put PCT cells have carbonic anhydrase. Oops. Okay. All right, so those are what we can do in the event of acidosis when our pH is too low. Well, what if our pH is too high? Then we're not going to secrete hydrogen ions, but we will reabsorb those babies. Okay, and we can. If we excrete potassium, we can reabsorb hydrogen ions. and I may talk about that more when we get into loop of Henle stuff on Friday, but it's probably more than what you need. So I maybe won't. All right, so then obviously we're doing the opposite things here. So if I'm in an alkalosis state, then it means that I don't have enough pH. I mean, I don't have enough hydrogen ions, because guess what? They're bound to bicarbonate. So I can, I guess we can put secrete. I don't know that I'll really secrete it. We'll just put eliminate. We won't reabsorb bicarbonate. Let's put it that way. Eliminate. Eliminate. It's worse than writing on the board. Eliminate bicarbonate. And I was just going to do something with that. While I was telling you that stuff. I don't know. Oh, I know. Yes. Okay. So there's one more thing that I want to do. And so this is the last thing. Then we're going to go right into how do you do an ABG. Okay. So now we need to see how do you get into an acidosis state. Because there's two ways that we can be in acidosis, and there's two ways that we can be in alkalosis. Okay, so the first way, obviously, if we're in acidosis, let's put that. We gained too many hydrogen ions, okay? Lactic acid fermentation, for example. Too much acid production. But by the same token, if I'm gaining hydrogen ions, I may also be losing bicarb. So pH-wise is the exact same effect, because it's a one-to-one relationship with the ions. If I gain 3 hydrogen ions, it will change the pH just as much as losing 3 bicarbonate ions. Okay, so these are exactly the same in their effect in producing acidosis, that change in pH. Okay, so either a gain of hydrogen ions or a loss of bicarb, and you're going to understand that here in just a minute when we talk about ABGs. All right, then alkalosis, conversely, would be lose hydrogen ions or gain bicarbs. And again, they will have the exact same pH effect if you gain bicarbs, if you lose hydrogen ions. Okay, so does anybody have any questions up to this point? I know this is all just stuff, but I am going to reiterate this in in-person meetings next week when we get into doing this stuff again. But I just want you to be able to start working on these problems. Okay, so let's just finish down to this point. It should be easy. So decrease in respiration. So I'm hypoventilating. So that's going to make my CO2 level go up and shift the reaction to the right, resulting in an increase in hydrogen ions, making the plasma more acidic. Okay. So when the body pH is decreased, so I'm in acidosis, again, what are the 3 compensatory renal mechanisms to restore pH? So again, we just did those. Secrete hydrogen ions, reabsorb bicarb, and make new bicarb. Okay. Normal arterial pH is 7.35 to 7.45. pH in alkalosis is greater than 7.45, and the pH in acidosis is less than 7.35. Okay, so we're going to leave this page now, and we're going to go into what ABGs are all about. But before we get into ABGs, we want to talk about what are some possible homeostatic imbalances that could happen. So I'm just going to get rid of this other page. Okay, So we want to look at this table right here. And I want to look at their characteristics. All right, so the first one is called metabolic acidosis. Okay, so we're gonna have, and I'm gonna write the numbers in here again, just so that we have them, 7.35 to 7.45, because you're gonna have to memorize these numbers. I won't give them to you on a test. They'll just be in your head. Yay. All right, so 7.35 to 7.45, my PCO2, and this is all in arterial blood, and I'm gonna explain, you know what, I'm gonna explain right now why we're gonna check arterial blood. And so that's gonna be 35 to 45. Oops, I love how this is the same. Look at that, 7.35, 35, 7.45, 45. And then bicarbonate levels are 22 to 26 milliequivalents per liter. All right, so normally when we take blood out of a person, we take it out of the veins, right, out of the venous system. Now, our venous blood has just come from the tissues. So we haven't had an opportunity yet to change it at all, to do anything to the pH or PCO2 levels or anything like that. And so it doesn't do any good to take blood out of a vein and test it to see if we're in a homeostatic imbalance. What we have to do is let the blood go to the lungs, let the blood, you know, the buffers in the blood do their job, let the respiratory system do its job, and then take the blood out and then see, are we still in an acid-base imbalance? So we have to do an arterial blood gas. And so ABG stands for arterial blood gas. And what we're testing now we're gonna test some other things. We'll test PO2 as well, but that's not gonna have a big effect on our diagnosis. What we're gonna check for, the three things we're gonna test in an ABG is the pH of the blood, the PCO2 of the blood, and the bicarbonate level of the blood. And we're gonna get values, okay? And then once we get those values, then we're gonna see, do they vary from homeostasis, and how do they vary from homeostasis, and then what possibly could have caused us to be in an acid-base imbalance. Now, how do we get an arterial blood gas? Because, you know, arteries are deep, and so it's kind of tricky, but we take it right here. So we take it out of the arterial artery, the radial artery, and I can just feel it right there, right where we take your pulse. That's where we'll stick the needle in, and then we'll withdraw some of that blood. So we never want to do a venous blood gas. That's not going to tell us anything. We want to do an arterial blood gas to let us know, are we in an imbalance? Okay, so what kinds of things could cause us to be in an imbalance? Let's see. So there are, obviously, you can either be in acidosis or alkalosis, and there are two possible of each. And it's either going to be metabolic or it's going to be respiratory. So we're going to look at the metabolic acidosis and alkalosis right now. Okay, so actually, this is the second most common acid-base imbalance you can be in, is metabolic acidosis. The most common one is respiratory acidosis. Okay, so then it goes respiratory acidosis, metabolic acidosis, metabolic alkalosis, and respiratory alkalosis. Just because this isn't a pathology, because it's hyperventilation. So there's no disease that causes you to hyperventilate. This is just kind of like a behavioral one or something. So usually, and it's temporary, it's very, very temporary. So we're almost never in respiratory alkalosis, but it's a possibility, so we're gonna learn about it. All right, so let's go to the metabolic acidosis thing. So what we're gonna do, remember, is make our pH now they put less than 7.4, but remember you're still okay until 7.35 and then anything less than that. So we're gonna go pH of less than 7.35. So what kinds of things could cause our pH to be less than 7.35 and our bicarbonate levels to be less than 22? Okay, so the first one, severe diarrhea. Now remember, you can either gain hydrogen ions or you can lose bicarbs as to cause you to be in an acidosis state. So look at in severe diarrhea. Bicarbonate-rich intestinal pancreatic secretions rushed through digestive tract before their solutes can be reabsorbed. So I just lost all of this bicarb in my diarrhea, okay? So that's why severe diarrhea, I'm gonna be acidic. Hey, renal disease, what if my kidneys can't secrete hydrogen ions, okay? So if I'm, you know, in kidney failure or something like that. One of the most common reasons why we're in metabolic acidosis is because of untreated diabetes mellitus. So if you're not taking your insulin and the glucose is staying within your bloodstream, what's happening is your body can't use glucose because they can't bring it into the cells. So what are they going to use instead? They're going to use fats and proteins as an energy fuel. And when you use a fat, a triglyceride is going to go into a fatty acid, or proteins to amino acids. Both of those are going to result in ketoacidosis. And so when we're using fats and proteins as an energy source, we will be acidic. So I've always wondered if people who really stuck to a strict ketogenic diet, they're going to be in ketoacidosis all the time. That's what they want. That's why they're losing weight, is because they're using fats as their energy source and not carbohydrates. So what does long-term ketoacidosis do to you? I don't know. And so that's why I'm interested, you know, usually people are not strict ketogenic, and because we're not supposed to be. So anyway, I don't want to get on a soapbox today. All right, starvation. You know what? Starvation is the same as untreated diabetes mellitus. It's exactly the same. People who have untreated diabetes mellitus are starving to death. So you're lacking cellular fuels. So you're using body proteins and fat reserves as energy. Both yield acidic metabolites as they're broken down for energy. It's not really any different than untreated diabetes mellitus. Okay, excess alcohol ingestion also, okay, because alcohol, I'm just gonna put a little note right here. When your liver gets the alcohol from your bloodstream that you've ingested, it's gonna convert it to acetic acid. And acetic acid is vinegar. And so the metabolism of alcohol turns into vinegar. Okay, so you'll get lots of acid from too much alcohol ingestion. Okay, and let's see. Let's not worry about this one. Okay, so we're not gonna do, not for right now. We may come back to that. I haven't decided yet, but let's just leave that one for now. Okay, so those are the causes for metabolic acidosis. So now we want to go into metabolic alkalosis. So remember, with alkalosis, it's going to be too many bicarbs, not enough hydrogen ions. So how can we lose hydrogen ions? Vomiting or getting our stomach pumped, gastric suctioning. Suctioning, yeah, that's what I said. So we lose stomach hydrochloric acid that needs to have hydrogen ion withdrawn from the blood to replace stomach acid. So our pH decreases and our bicarb levels increase proportionately. So we took we took the hydrogen ions out of the blood, and so now you got bicarbs left over. We're not going to worry about the diuretics right now either. I think we'll come back to this, but you guys need some more kidney information, some loop of Henle stuff before we do this. Okay, so maybe we'll come back to that after Friday. This one's easy. Okay, ingestion of excessive amounts of sodium bicarbonate. What's sodium bicarbonate in? Tums. So if you have an acidic, you know, like GERD or that heartburn, there we go, acid reflux, there it is. We take Tums to try to treat that. Well, if we take too many Tums, that can put us into metabolic alkalosis because we gained too many bicarbonate ions. Okay, Alka-Seltzer, Rolaids, all the same thing. Okay, constipation. Remember we had diarrhea up here for metabolic acidosis. Well, constipation is too many bicarbs that we saved. So yeah, now we're going to become alkaline instead of acidic. And the same with aldosterone. We're going to skip that for now. I want you to know it because it's really going to help with your, when you take pharmacology, but not right now. Okay, we'll do that after we do loop of Henle stuff, when we talk about diuretics. Okay, so that's how you become metabolic acidosis, or get into metabolic acidosis, or alkalosis, sorry. Okay, respiratory acidosis. We kind of already talked about this when we were talking about respiratory system. So really, what is this? COPD. Okay, so any condition that impairs gas exchange or lung ventilation. So chronic bronchitis, cystic fibrosis, emphysema, increased airway resistance, decreased expiratory airflow, leading to a retention of CO2. So if I retain CO2, that's going to get converted into carbonic acid, and then I'll have a drop in pH. Okay, rapid shallow breathing. You know what? When do we ever do that? Never. Okay, so don't even give that to me as an answer. And maybe narcotic, barbiturate overdose, injury to the brainstem, depression, so just depression of the respiratory centers. But this is, you know, how often are you taking narcotics enough or barbiturates enough to cause you go into respiratory acidosis? Not as often as we're going to have people that have COPD. Lots of people in the world have COPD, so lots of people in the world have respiratory acidosis. And then respiratory alkalosis is always hyperventilation, okay? And so maybe if I have asthma, if I have pneumonia, anxiety, or I'm at high altitudes, then I'm trying to raise my PO2 at the expense of excessive carbon dioxide excretion, but I'm never hyperventilating for long. Okay, so respiratory alkalosis is never really a you know, like a serious problem. And then brain tumor injury, we're not going to do that either because we hardly ever see that. Okay. So now, why did I need to know these? Because you'll see right now. Okay, you can go through this if you want and read through this to figure out how to do ABGs, but I'm just gonna, I've put together a way for you to do ABGs, and so I'm gonna have you follow that, but this is here if you want to use it. Okay, then this is also a little thing. We kind of will come to this today, this stuff right here with seesaw effect and elevator effect. Oops, somebody has a question. Hang on. I should keep my, yes, pH levels are definitely a solid measurement of, I don't know, overall health. They're gonna give you a good idea if you're in you know, an imbalance, but it's not going to tell you, you know, how healthy I am. No, absolutely not. Because they're so transitory. So it's only when we're in a problem. So one of those 4 problems that we saw, that we would, you know, pH would indicate that I am not healthy. But no, if I just went out and, so Tony, if I tested your blood right now, I would have no idea how healthy you are. All I would know is that you don't have one of those 4 disorders, but that's all it's going to tell me. So no, pH levels are not a solid measurement of overall health. No, not at all. We're only going to measure those when you're sick. Okay. So I hate to say this, but it's relevant, and I guess I haven't done what I wanted to do, is put together a thing about COVID-19. So you guys tell me right now, all of the victims of COVID, not death victims, not those who died, but those who are suffering, who are trying to get better from COVID-19 right now, what are they in? I'm going to add that from now on. I'm going to add that in one of our problems. So people with COVID-19 are in which acid-base imbalance?
Respiratory acidosis.
Absolutely, you bet. And so one of the things with respiratory acidosis, if your pH drops too far, you'll go into a coma. So we got to help these people, and that's why we need to ventilate them so well, because they can't breathe on their own. They can't get the hydrogen ions back out, and their kidneys are going to be overwhelmed with the work. And so we've got to ventilate them. That's the only way that we're going to be able to help them with this so severe respiratory acidosis that those who are really affected by the disease are in. Wow, just just, now that I think of that, I'm like, oh, I'm so sad that that's now going to be a thing in my lessons after we recover. Well, not even recover, it's just always going to be in my lessons. Okay, so we got seesaw effect, we've got elevator effect, and I'll show you how those apply in just a little bit. Then we got this other stuff. This is all just like extra. You don't really need it. All you need is this page right here. So let's go to this page. So I want you to keep this off to the side as I work through these problems, these sample problems for you. And then, and so you kind of help me walk through this. I'm going to do one problem all together, walking through the chart, and then we'll do some problems together. I'm not going to do any of these because these are your practice ones. And I will load, when we get closer to exam time, closer to the 24th, I think, isn't that when our exam is? I'll load the answers, the key to this, but I really want you to work these on your own and not just look at the answers and go, okay, write them down. No, that's not going to do you any good. You're not going to know how to do it. So let me get another piece of paper and give you some problems. So give me just a second because I'm pulling these suckers out of my head. Because I have to think backwards. I have to think, well, what do I want to do first? And then I got to come up with some numbers. So let's do, okay, so our pH is going to be, and our PCO2 will be, and our bicarbs will be, okay. Oh, you couldn't see that. There we go. Let me get this over here. I have more room. All right. And there we go. All right. So where do I start? I don't know. Well, let's go to this and let's go through our different steps. Okay. So step number 1 says determine if it is acidosis or alkalosis. And I put some arrows in here, and the arrows will make sense because they're going to relate back to this right here, to respiratory, seesaw effect or elevator effect, because see, we got some arrows in here. So we're going to come back to that. All right, so determine if it's acidosis or alkalosis. So look at that. The pH is below 7.35, so I'm going to go just like that. I'm going to put a down arrow, okay? Now, it says if it's less than 7.35, then it's acidosis. So I'm going to write acidosis right here. But what kind of acidosis is it? It could be respiratory acidosis. It could be metabolic acidosis. Now I have to investigate further. So the next value, it says determine if it's respiratory or metabolic. So let's go, and we're always going to check to see if it's respiratory first, okay? So because we know it's acidosis, we're checking to see if it's respiratory acidosis. So let's look at right here. So it says if it's respiratory acidosis, because that's what I'm looking for, because I already know that it's acidosis because it's 7.3 or 7.23. Okay, so whoops. All right, so I'm looking to see if it's respiratory acidosis. My PCO2 has to be greater than 45. So I come over here. Oh, actually, you should put your arrows in first because that helps too. So this is lower because remember this should be 35 to 45. Ooh, sorry about that. And this is low too because that should be between 22 to 26. All right, so now if we go back to this page, is my PCO2 greater than 45? Come back to here. No, it's, oh, sorry, I won't put my finger in there. No, it's not. It's lower than 35. So it cannot be respiratory acidosis. So then it says, if those don't apply, look at bicarbonate level. So now I want to see, is it metabolic acidosis? So I look to see, is my bicarbonate level less than 22? Yes, my bicarbonate level is less than 22. So now I know it is metabolic acidosis. Oh, and here is how I'm going to grade each question. So each, what are these? Each ABG is worth 5 points. Okay, so 5 possible. So where are my 5 possible points going to come from? Okay, here is one telling me which acid-base imbalance it is. The second one is which type of acid-base imbalance. So that's metabolic. Okay, so now I have two more things that I'm trying to figure out. So it says, after I figure out the cause, then down here, it says assess for compensation, the body's ability to correct acidosis or alkalosis. Okay, compensation is present, not really present, but full. Okay, so my body has totally fixed the problem if the pH is normal, even though PCO2 and bicarbs are abnormal. Okay, if compensation is present, assess which is the primary component causing the imbalance and which is the compensatory component correcting the imbalance. Okay, so then we go back to our instructions, and after we figured out that it's metabolic acidosis, then it says to determine the type and degree of compensation, if any. So now it says, if the cause of the imbalance is respiratory, compensation will always be renal. And that's something you just memorize. You should never, ever have to think about again. If your breathing is jacked up and you can't, and you're in a respiratory acidosis or alkalosis, your kidneys will take care of the problem. But if your body is the cause of the problem, something other than your respiratory system is the cause, then we know it's metabolic. And so your lungs will compensate. So your lungs will either hyperventilate or hypoventilate to fix the problem. So if it's a metabolic cause, it will always be respiratory. So let's do that step next. So we want to look at what kind of compensation. So we just said, if it's a metabolic cause, it's going to be respiratory compensation. Okay, so that's my third point, okay, is to tell me which kind of compensation. So it's respiratory compensation. Where am I going to get my last 2 points from? Well, the next one we want to look at, it says, now look at the compensating value. Okay, so this is going to be the one, is it either a renal thing or is it a respiratory thing? So it's going to be bicarbs, okay, bicarb level or PCO2 level. Okay, so if the compensating value is out of range, then the compensation is partial. So let's go back here and we can see respiratory compensation. So we're looking at PCO2 levels. Is my PCO2 out of range? Yes, it is. Okay, so I know that then it is partial compensation, partial renal compensation. That's my fourth one. I mean, respiratory compensation. Now, why is it partial? Okay, number one, because my pH is still out of homeostasis. And number two, my compensating value is lower, which means I'm hyperventilating. I am blowing off lots of CO2, so I have less CO2 than I normally do, less than 35. And is hyperventilation the compensation for, where's that sheet? When my pH is too low, do I hyperventilate? Well, let's go back to here. If my pH is too low, I hyperventilate. Yes, okay, so I know that I'm trying to fix the problem. I just haven't completely fixed the problem, so then it's partial compensation. Okay, so there's 4 points. So how do I get the 5? This is my bonus. Okay, so really they're out of 4 points. Each question's out of 4, but I can get one more point, my 5th point, which, you know, doesn't count in the total. So it's, each question's out of 4, but you can make it out of 5. So my bonus is what caused me to be in metabolic acidosis in the first place. So then you're going to memorize these right here, these causes. Okay, so maybe I have severe diarrhea. Because remember, with severe diarrhea, what's happening? I'm losing bicarbs. So this is full credit on a question. All right, does anybody have any questions right at this moment with this particular question? Because I'm going to give you examples of all 3 and then we'll be done.
I have a question. So I don't understand like partial cons.
I know. You'll get it after I do the other 2. And
okay,
then,
cool.
And then ask me again if you're still stuck on partial, okay?
Okay.
No worries. All right, so there's that one. Okay, so now let's do another one. Yeah, because the degree of compensation is always the hardest. Okay, it's the one that you're like, oh gosh, I don't know. But seriously, as soon as I get through with this, then you'll go, oh, okay, I get that. All right, so now, yes.
So on the bonus point, when we have to give what caused it, so we just go through the list that you gave us on this paper and just see which one would match it the best?
No, just anyone.
Just any one, as long as it's in like the metabolic acidosis, you put a metabolic acidosis cause.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And you're gonna need to memorize those.
Okay.
Because when you do this on the exam, you can't, obviously you can't use anything. So you just got to memorize which pathologies fit into which acid-base imbalance.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. So now let's go to, let's do this one. Oh, I know. Oop. Oop. Okay. All right. So, oops. Oh, that's what moved. So after we do these 3 examples, then I'm going to talk to you about how to use the arrows and how the arrows can help you too, if you want. All right. Okay. So I'm going to have you guys help me now. So what do you think this is? Is it high, low, or within range?
Hi.
Hi.
Good. Okay, so what does a high pH mean?
Alkalosis.
Yay. Okay, now, seriously, this is probably the hardest thing to do out of, really everything. Well, I shouldn't say the hardest. This is the most important thing that you guys have to do. Because if you get these backwards, it'll throw off the whole rest of the question. You'll be wrong for everything else. So you've got to know the difference between acidosis and alkalosis. Well, I'll just put it like this. We can compare these two. Okay, so don't ever mess these up. Acidosis always less than 3.5. Alkalosis always more than 4.45. Okay. All right, so alkalosis, there's 1 point. Yay. Now, let's do the arrows for the other 2. So this one is what? High, low, or normal?
Low.
Good.
Low.
Perfect. Okay, now what about this one?
It's in range.
Yeah, it's within range. And so what we do when we have a within range is that we draw a horizontal arrow like that. That's our no change arrow. So that means our kidneys aren't doing anything yet. Okay. All right. So now, if my PCO2, so let's go back to this thing right here. So we've decided that it's in alkalosis. So now we need to decide, is it respiratory or metabolic alkalosis? So we're going to go to the respiratory alkalosis first. And we're going to look at here and it says, if my PCO2 is below 35. So now let's look over here. Is my PCO2 below 35?
Yes.
Yes. So then I put right here, I don't even have to go anywhere else yet. What do I put right here?
Respiratory.
Perfect. Oh, I always write too close. Okay, so there's point 2. So I have respiratory alkalosis. Now, we just said if the imbalance is respiratory, the compensation will always be what? Right there, renal. Okay, so I'm going to put right here, renal compensation. Okay. So our kidneys should be changing this number in order to fix the problem. Let's see, who is that? That's, if you, oh, who's ever not muted, can you mute yourself real quick? I don't know who it is. Okay. All right, so did this number change? No, it didn't change. So does that mean my kidneys are actually doing something to fix the problem? No, they're not. Okay, so let's look here. Okay, so this is the next step. If the compensating value is within normal range, there is no compensation. Okay, so what I'm going to put right here is no renal compensation. So this is 0.3, this is 0.4. So your answers for each of your points here, these are all the possibles you can have. For point number 1, you're only ever going to say acidosis or alkalosis. For point number 2, you're only ever going to say metabolic or respiratory. For point number 3, you are only ever going to say respiratory or renal. And for point number 4, you're either going to say partial, no, or full, which we'll do a full in just a minute now that I've told you, but it doesn't matter. Okay, so now do you guys understand why this is no renal compensation? Anybody have a question about that? Okay, no, the compensating value is not always bicarb, okay? Because look at what is the compensating value in this problem. It's this level, it's the PCO2. It's whatever the compensation is. So if the cause is metabolic, in this question, because it's metabolic, it's because this number is too low. But in this case, it's respiratory alkalosis because this number is too high. So then that makes this number, the bicarb, the renal compensation. Okay, so that's the compensating number. It's whatever is left over. So so in this one, these were the cause, so these were the problems, this is what was fixing it. But in this question, these two were the problem, this is what's supposed to be fixing it, but it's not. So the partial, no, the partial in this question is this number right here. Partial means that the compensating value, this level right here, is not in range. Okay, so if we go back to this question, partial means, where is it? Right here. Partial compensation means that your body is responding to the imbalance, but it hasn't fixed the imbalance yet. Okay, so if we go back to this question, I am trying to hyperventilate. So let's put this in here. Because what I would want to do in the case of my severe diarrhea, because I've lost my bicarbonate, I'm trying to hyperventilate to blow off the extra hydrogen ions with CO2. So I'm blowing off CO2 and I'm taking hydrogen ions with it, but I didn't fix the fact that I'm still in acidosis. So maybe when we took this value that the person had been sick long enough, hadn't been hyperventilating long enough to try to fix this problem. Let me check my chats and see. Okay, so are you talking about, yes, so Tony just said, so would bicarbonate have to exceed 26 to be partial in this case? Absolutely. Okay, so in order to make this a partial compensation, this has to be out of range, but it's going to be, oh no, it's not going to be bigger than 26 because then that would make it more alkalotic. This is going to be lower than 26. I mean, lower than 22, because if I'm in alkalosis, what do I have? Too little hydrogen ions, too many bicarbs. Okay, so what am I going to do to try to get rid of it? This number has to be low. And I'm going to show you a little trick so that you know if it's right here in just a second. Okay, so does that make sense, Tony? Okay, good. All right, so now let's talk about arrows.
Question.
Yes, what?
So if it's So if the compensation is renal, then we'll always look at the bicarb for
Always.
partial or the no.
Always.
And
Yep.
then so for respiratory, we always look at PCO2.
Always. Yes.
Okay.
Yep, perfect. Okay. All right, so let's check out arrows. Okay, so let's do my last question and then we'll do arrows. All right, so now I just told you what we're gonna do, but that's okay, because we only got one more choice of problems that we can have. So let's do, oh, we didn't do a cause right here. So we didn't do a bonus. Well, so what is the bonus? There's really only one thing. If I'm in respiratory alkalosis, I'm always what? I'm always hyperventilating. Okay, respiratory alkalosis is always hyperventilation. And so do I ever hyperventilate for a long time? What do you think would happen to me if I hyperventilated for a long time? What do we know happens? What happens to my CO2 levels if I pass out, exactly. Okay, because I blew off too much CO2, that stopped my breathing, I pass out, and then what does my brain do? Makes me go back to normal again, because hyperventilation is almost always a voluntary problem. Okay, like I'm nervous or something like that. Okay, so yeah, I never hyperventilate long enough to really be sick. And so my kidneys will never really, I'll almost always be in no compensation if I'm in respiratory alkalosis. Okay, but that's extending beyond what you need to know right now. All right, so now let's do the last question that I wanted to talk about. So let's see, let's do, and okay, so now what? Look at my pH. What's wrong with my pH? Is there anything wrong with my pH? Am I in a normal range?
Yeah.
Yeah, I am. Okay, so let's leave that for just a minute. But let's look at these other numbers. Are they within normal range too?
No.
No, they're not. Okay, so what that means is there's something wrong with me. Okay, but there's something wrong with me, but my body fixed my pH problem. I'm still sick. There's still something jacked up with me, which we'll try to figure out what is my problem in a minute. But at the moment, and when we take an ABG, you guys, it's a moment in time. It's a snapshot of where you were right at that moment. 2 minutes later, it could be totally different. But at that moment, whatever my body was doing was enough to put it back into normal range. Okay, so I'm within normal range. However, to make sure that you can work through the rest of the problem, we're going to draw arrows, but we're going to look at what side of normal are we on. Okay, so 7.4 is supposed to be normal, but we're on the what side of 7.4?
The higher side.
The higher side, right. So I'm going to put an arrow in, but I always put in, and I'll make it more dotted. I always put in a dotted arrow when I'm within normal range, okay? Because what that's telling me is that, yeah, I'm in normal range, but I was just much higher than this, okay? So what was I just before I took this picture?
Alcolytic.
Yep. Perfect. Okay, so now let's figure out what kind of alkalosis I was in. Okay, let's look at PCO2 levels. Is it high, low, or normal?
Hi.
High, perfect. Okay, what about my bicarbs? High, low, or normal?
Hi.
High, good. Okay. So now we can go back to here. I'm in alkalosis. Okay, so let's check to see, am I in respiratory alkalosis? Nope, because my PCO2 has to be less than 35. Am I in metabolic alkalosis? Yeah, because my bicarb has to be greater than 26. So now I want to talk about the arrows and how the arrows can help you. So let's go to this page and let's talk about the seesaw effect and the elevator effect. So this has to do with the causes. So if I'm in respiratory acidosis, my pH is down and my PCO2 is up. So my arrows go in the opposite direction, like a seesaw. Okay? If I'm in respiratory alkalosis, my pH is up, but my PCO2 will be down. So my arrows, if it's a respiratory cause, my arrows will always go in the opposite direction. But if it's a metabolic cause, right here, we have the elevator effect. So if my pH is low, my bicarb will be low. If my pH is high, my bicarb will be high. So now let's take that back to all of the questions we've done so far. And let's look at this one. Oops, got static electricity. Okay, so this is low. And my PCO2 is low. So is this seesaw or elevator?
Elevator.
Elevator, because this is going in the same direction. So it's not a PCO2 cause. It's not a respiratory cause. Look at that. There's my low pH. There's my low bicarb. So it's elevator because they're both low right here. And then this is metabolic acidosis like we decided. And then if the CO2 also goes down, if all three go down, it's always partial. Okay. So if all of them are going in the same direction, if all the arrows go in the same direction, it's partial compensation. Then if we look at this one, here I have an up arrow, but here I have a down arrow. So this is what? So these are going in the opposite direction. So it's the seesaw effect, which means the cause is, what did we say? Respiratory. Now, there's nothing going on. This guy's not doing anything. So if my compensating value isn't doing anything, it's always no compensation. All right, so now let's finish off this question. Okay, this number is high. This number is high. So is it respiratory? What did we decide? If it's respiratory alkalosis, what does my PCO2 have to be? Less than 35. Is my number less than 35?
No.
No, it's high. Now look at my bicarb. Is my bicarb high?
Yes.
Is my pH high?
Yes.
So now what is it?
Metabolic.
Yay, it is. Oh, I always break that too close, dang it. Okay, so metabolic alkalosis, yay. Now, I'm in metabolic alkalosis. What is my compensation? If it's metabolic, my compensation is always
Respiratory.
respiratory. Perfect. But now, let's look at this page. Look at what it says. If the pH is normal, but the cause and the compensation values are out of range, it's full compensation. So now this is full respiratory compensation. And how do I know that? Oops, that looks like fall. Full respiratory compensation. How do I know it's full? Because my hypoventilation, my retention of CO2 counteracted my too much bicarb and put me back within a normal range. But yet, because I still have a lot of bicarb, I still have to hypoventilate. I still have to be holding my breath and retaining CO2 to keep this within a normal range. All right, so now what would be my bonus?
Would it be like vomiting or?
Yeah, could be vomiting, could be constipation, could be I ate too many Tums. Okay, but something where either I lost hydrogen ions, so then I have too many unattached bicarbs, or I just I absorbed too many bicarbs, or I ate too many bicarbs. Okay. All right. Now, what questions do you have? Or are you just overwhelmed at this point? Okay, since you're not asking me any questions right now, which is fine. Okay, oh, does the arrow trick always work? Yes, Alyssa, the arrow trick always works, always and forever. So here's the deal, you guys. I can take anybody off the street, and if I teach them the arrows, they will always get it right. Not know any physiology or anything like that. But the problem though, Alyssa, is you got to get the arrows right. Because you mess up your arrows and then you're dead in the water. You're never going to get the answer right. But if you can do the arrows correctly, it will always work, always and forever. Okay. Of course, there's weird questions. I will not ever give you a weird question, but there are some times when you could be in both. So let me give you an example. So I had a norovirus infection. That's what you always get on cruise ships, and you have like super bad diarrhea. You know, when you get food poisoning on a cruise ship, well, not food poisoning, but you get super sick on a cruise ship, it's usually a norovirus infection. It's a GI tract infection. So anyway, I had the norovirus one year, and oh my gosh, you guys, I was dying. So, and sorry, this is probably TMI, but I'm gonna tell you anyway, because it's the perfect example, because when it was happening to me, I'm such a nerd that I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in both. So first of all, it manifested itself with just severe diarrhea. So I had this bad diarrhea. So what am I in if I have super bad diarrhea?
Metabolic acidosis.
Right. So I was in metabolic acidosis, and I'm sitting there going, oh my gosh, I am losing bicarb like crazy. And then all of a sudden, I was so nauseous that I started throwing up, but yet I still had diarrhea. So I had to throw up in the shower that was right next to the toilet. So now I'm thinking, holy crap, I just went into what?
Metabolic alkalosis.
Yes, because I'm vomiting at the same time as I'm in diarrhea while I am having diarrhea. So yeah, there can be like weird stuff like that where you get funky numbers. And then let's say that you already had emphysema and then you had super, super bad diarrhea. Now you're in respiratory acidosis and metabolic alkalosis at the same time. Okay, so I will not give you any of those problems. I will just make sure that you only have one problem, and then you tell me what it is, and then the arrows will always work. So I wasn't even compensating. I couldn't even change my breathing, because that's the only thing. My breathing didn't know which way to go. Do I hyperventilate? Do I hypoventilate? I don't even know, because I was just, I was so sick. So sick. I was just causing in both directions. So I was metabolic alkalosing and metabolic acidosing at the same time. Okay, so there you go. And don't worry, we are going to visit this again in a live meeting, and we can even take, you know, another time to do some more prep work. But what I want you to do, you know, when you got nothing to do, right? You got nothing to do. Where are my practice problems? So you've got 16 practice problems. Oh, they're over here. Okay, so you got these babies that you can be doing. So just make sure that you have all 5 points in here. So I'm not going to do the question, but let me just show you what you would write. So in here, you would put like metabolic alkalosis. And then you would put partial respiratory compensation, and then you would put vomiting. Okay, so when you get in the habit of writing your answers like this, then when you come to the test, then it just makes it so much easier for me to grade, because it's just all right there, just all points, boom, 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 and then I can grade it super easy. Okay, so I don't even know, that's not even the answer. I know what the answer is, at least right now. I know that it's fully compensated some kind of acidosis, but I don't know what, because I didn't look at my numbers. It's fully compensated metabolic acidosis, if you want to write that down. So you should get to what I just did. You should be able to just totally look at that right now and go, I know exactly what that is, without even having to do the problem. Because obviously, I made up all these numbers. So I have to think of the answer, and then I have to work backwards to the numbers to get them. But you guys can do it too, because you're rock stars. I know that you can. All right, so we're gonna end right here, and hope that you have a good tomorrow. So I will not see you tomorrow at all. And then I will see you on Friday at 9 o'clock. Have a great day until then, or time until then.